Billionaire dismisses. Staff handshakes 60s later. Black female partner withdraws $2 billion support. Did you really think you could walk in here and own the room? Olivia's voice sliced through the silence like a razor edge. Ethan Harper froze mid-stride as the automatic glass doors slid shut behind him. The afternoon sun refracted into a dozen beams that caught on his polished shoes. He swallowed, adjusting his tie, the confident mask he wore so often threatening to crack. This was Manhattan 2025, in the glittering heart of New York's financial district, yet the walls of Equigrowth Capital's boardroom felt colder than any winter wind whipping down Wall Street. Moments earlier, Ethan had strode through the lobby of the Equitower 2 floors below the commanding skyline of Midtown. His fintech startup, Harper Pay, was known for explosive growth until the past 2 quarters of revenue stagnation and a messy acquisition lawsuit in Austin tarnished that shine. Today, he needed a $2 billion lifeline, and he intended to get it by any means necessary. As he entered, a hush fell across the long walnut table. His breath hitched. He'd walked into a gauntlet. At the far end sat Olivia Martinez, managing partner of Equigrowth Capital. A Latinx woman in her early 40s, her auburn hair pinned back, wearing a simple yet elegant navy sheath. No nameplate, no flashy gadgets, just a vintage pocket watch clasped in her hand. Ethan had seen that watch in the proposal deck, a symbol of legacy and resilience, but he hadn't expected its real-world presence. His lips curved in a practiced smile. "Good afternoon. I trust we can get straight to the numbers." Olivia's eyes never wavered. "Mr. Harper," she said softly. Voice calm yet undeniably authoritative. "Numbers are important, but respect is indispensable." She tapped the triangular face of her pocket watch, its hands frozen at 10:10, an intentional homage to optimism she'd explained once. The gesture drew every eye in the room. Ethan's CFO, a white man 2 seats down, shifted uncomfortably. The boardroom's soft LED lights dimmed, as though at Olivia's silent command, spotlighting her figure. Ethan cleared his throat. "I've built Harper Pay from the ground up. You know my track record." He sat at the head chair as if it were his rightful throne, but no one moved to make room. The chair groaned under his weight, the leather creaking an inauspicious welcome. In the tense quiet, he realized that cushion felt less like authority and more like a trap. Olivia slid a slim tablet onto the table. The screen glowed with a single headline, "Accelerator 2010 Idea Theft Allegations." Ethan's heart stumbled. He stifled a flinch. Years ago, he'd promised to back promising startups. Olivia's had been one of them. She was his mentee until he'd repackaged her concept, shelved her out. She had never forgotten. He forced his voice steady. "This is about the future, not old grievances." His words echoed hollowly. Without blinking, Olivia tapped again. Charts shifted to a liquidity risk assessment, numbers in bold red, burn rates, delayed launches, sinking user retention. Ethan's throat tightened. Her finger hovered above the watch. "You said respect is passé when you refused to shake hands with staff," she murmured, voice soft enough to be intimate. "What you don't understand is that trust is the currency that underpins every deal." Ethan's pulse raced. He had prepared a growth-centric pitch. Instead, he faced an autopsy. Around him, the board members, diverse faces of every background, leaned forward, eyes hungry for her verdict. His confidence wavered as the LED lights flickered. The pocket watch chimed, echoing through his mind. He swallowed. Olivia stood. The room went darker. "We're not investing in Taylor's version of your empire," she declared, words slow, deliberate. "We're investing in integrity." She closed the tablet pocket watch, sighing shut. Ethan realized she'd already closed this chapter. His empire's fate was sealed. A single flicker of panic surged through him. The stakes were never just about money. They were about character loyalty, the simple decency he'd discarded. The watch struck again at 10:10, resounding through the hushed space. He thought, how much had he lost before she even said no? Olivia placed her hand on the door handle. "This meeting is adjourned," she said softly. The click of the latch felt like the final gavel. Ethan sat frozen, heart hammering, the dimmed room pressing in. And in that suspended moment, he understood that the next move would determine not just his company's survival, but his soul's redemption or its complete collapse. What happened next would change everything. "Everyone's eyes are on you, Mr. Harper," a quiet voice murmured, just as Olivia's heels clicked away down the hallway, leaving Ethan alone in the half-lit boardroom. He stared at the walnut table's polished surface, where her vintage pocket watch lay open, its hands still fixed at 10:10. That frozen smile in metal felt like a challenge, an accusation that he had stopped caring about anyone but himself. Every fiber of his being, ego, ambition, pride, wanted to smash that watch to show he was unbreakable. Instead, he lifted it gently, hearing the faint tick inside the case. The tick sounded impossibly loud in the hush. In that heartbeat of silence, Ethan's mind raced back to the moment he'd first met Olivia Martinez 10 years ago in an accelerator program that he co-founded. She was eager then, overflowing with ideas that seemed too ambitious for her small Brooklyn apartment. He'd patted her shoulder, taken notes, promised mentorship, then quietly adopted her concept for a peer-to-peer lending pilot. She'd trusted him. He'd cashed in. And she'd never forgotten. Now this symbol of her resilience sat in his palm, as though daring him to recognize what he'd lost. He pressed his thumb against the watch's crystal, the light refracting into tiny prisms. Each prism felt like a memory, the late nights reviewing Olivia's pitch, the proud "thank you, sir," she'd whispered, and the eager article he'd penned about the next big thing in fintech, omitting her name. He'd soared to Forbes, riding the wave of her insight. He'd convinced himself he was generous, magnanimous. But that afternoon, her calm dismantling of his empire felt like ultimate retribution. Ethan felt the boardroom's chill, as though the room itself recoiled from his presence. He glanced at the tufted leather chairs, each one holding the weight of unseen witnesses, eager to see if he'd ask for mercy, spin an apology, or cling desperately to his last shred of authority. His CFO, Michael Patterson, hovered by the door, face flushed. He wanted to speak up to salvage the deal, yet he too remembered the way Olivia's words had sliced through the room. No one interrupted her. No one dared question her moral compass. And they never would. A low hum from the overhead LED lights snapped Ethan back. He closed the watch and tucked it into his jacket's inner pocket. This was no longer a negotiation over market share or burn rate. It was a reckoning of character. He felt a knot in his chest, a blend of dread, shame, and an unanticipated spark of something new, humility. The kind of humility that left him exposed but curiously alive, as if a part of him had been dusted off and given room to breathe. He rose, straightening his suit jacket, even though no one would see it, and turned toward the door Olivia had used. The corridor beyond looked bright, almost inviting. She'd moved on to her next meeting, confident that her decision would reverberate throughout the finance world. But Ethan realized he had one act left, a choice between hurling excuses or forging a new path built on respect. His hand hovered at the door handle, knuckles whitening. He hesitated. In that split second, he understood that the real risk wasn't in losing $2 billion. It was in losing the chance to become the leader he claimed to be. With his breath caught between regret and resolve, he pushed the door open, stepping into the corridor's fluorescent glow. Silence trailed behind him like a shadow. He didn't know what awaited the next moment, but he felt its weight settling in his bones, pulling him forward. "Honestly, I'm running out of options," Ethan whispered to himself as he emerged into the fluorescent-lit corridor, the echo of Olivia's parting words still ringing in his ears. He paused under the harsh ceiling panels, the vintage pocket watch now safely tucked against his heart, its frozen hands at 10:10. A constant reminder that time itself felt suspended. He'd lost the boardroom without firing a shot, and not for lack of firepower, but for lack of respect. That realization stung more than any balance sheet disaster. He forced his pace toward the elevator bank, each step feeling like a confession. Earlier that day, he had believed sheer confidence could bulldoze every obstacle. Now he knew that arrogance was a liability. The walls of Equitower, draped in glossy glass and bristling with screens announcing D&I initiatives, seemed to mock him. Diversity and inclusion had become more than corporate buzzwords. It was Olivia's creed, her unspoken code that he had violated in the most visible way. When the elevator doors whooshed open, he practically leapt in breath, coming fast. As the car descended, his mind spun through scenarios: a public apology, a belated show of contrition, a generous donation to Equigrowth's new Women of Color Fund. Each felt either too timid or too manipulative. He clenched his fist around the watch in his breast pocket, the metal biting into his fingers. This watch had carried Olivia's family legacy through hardship. Now it carried the weight of his guilt. On the lobby floor, Michael, his CFO, waited with urgency. Michael's pale face and rumpled tie said he'd been pacing for a while. "They're already calling it a coup," Michael said low, glancing at the live feed TVs above the reception desk. News tickers blared. Equigrowth Capital pulls 2B backing from Harper Pay. Fintech leader falls from grace over respect scandal. Michael's eyes darted. "We need a plan fast." Ethan nodded, forcing calm. "All right, call an emergency board meeting, get the PR team on standby, and set up a call with Equigrowth's legal counsel." He paused, recalling Olivia's words about character being the foundation of any deal. "And draft a genuine apology," he added, voice catching. "Not a spin. Genuine." Michael's eyebrow shot up. Genuine wasn't in their vocabulary, but Ethan repeated softer. "Genuine." Michael exhaled, nodding, already pulling out his phone. As they strode toward the glass walls separating the lobby from the plaza, Ethan realized this crisis was more than business. It was a reckoning with his own soul. He thought of startups led by people who looked like Olivia Bright, underrepresented, hungry to prove themselves. He'd sidelined them, justified it as streamlining decisions. Now he saw the cost, not just in dollars, but in human capital, in trust, in dignity. He looked down at the pocket watch again, feeling its cool surface. A soft hum rose from the lobby speakers, playing an instrumental version of an old protest anthem. It was a reminder that movements were born from small sparks, an act of defiance, a refusal to be invisible. Olivia had been that spark today, igniting a larger conversation about respect in every boardroom from Manhattan to Silicon Valley. Michael's voice broke through his reverie boards in 30. "Are you ready?" Ethan straightened his shoulders, smoothing his tie. Every instinct screamed to barricade himself, to flail in damage control. Instead, he felt something sturdier rise within him, a resolve to face the storm head-on, to dismantle the old version of himself and build something new. "Let's do it," he said, voice firm. "And afterward, I want to meet Olivia. Face to face." As they reached the conference room door, already filling with nervous executives, Ethan's heart pounded in sync with the ticking in his chest. The elevator pitch he had practiced 100 times wouldn't save him now. What might he realized was authenticity. With a final steadying breath, he pushed the door open. Silence fell once more, and in that pregnant pause he glimpsed the toughest hurdle yet winning back respect, and perhaps himself. "Mr. Harper, you have the floor." The interim board chair's voice cracked like ice as Ethan stepped into the fluorescent glare of the emergency meeting room. The long mahogany table felt narrower, the dozen faces around it cold with anticipation. He closed his eyes for a fraction, drawing in a steadying breath. This moment was no longer about revenue or market share. It was about raw accountability. He cleared his throat. "I stand before you not as a titan of fintech, but as a man who failed to uphold the basic decency that binds any successful organization." The room shifted. You could almost hear the exhalation of surprise. In that instant, Ethan tapped into a reservoir of humility he never knew he possessed. He'd rehearsed every financial projection, every PR spin, every legal loophole, but none could mask the truth Olivia had laid bare. Respect was the true currency. He met the board's gaze one by one, the veteran investor in tailored gray, the young product strategist with her arms folded, the marketing lead biting her lip. "I was blinded by ambition," he continued, voice stronger now. "I believed confidence alone could carry us forward. But confidence without compassion is a hollow shell." Today, I apologize for my arrogance, and I pledge a new path for HarperPay, one built on transparency, inclusion, and genuine respect for every individual, regardless of title or background. A murmur rippled through the room. Ethan felt his pulse in his throat, the pocket watch in his breast pocket, pressing against his ribcage like a heartbeat. The watch, Olivia's family heirloom, had become a symbol of everything he'd lost and could still reclaim. He opened his suit and placed it on the table, its smooth brass face gleaming under the overhead lights. This watch represents legacy resilience and the power of time well spent. I commit to establishing a permanent diversity and inclusion council at HarperPay, funded by 5% of our annual profits, chaired by leaders from underrepresented communities. Silence settled. He'd risked everything, his pride, his control, his public image, in offering not just words, but structural change. He watched as the CFO's pen hovered above a notepad, the veteran investor's hand brushing against the watch's glass cover, curiosity flickering in her eyes. Just when he thought the moment might break in his favor, the door behind him creaked open. Every head turned. In slipped a buzz of anticipation and dread. Ethan's heart lurched. The final verdict was on the brink of being delivered, but the next presence in that threshold could tilt the scales entirely. Is there anyone here who still believes HarperPay is worth saving? The interim chair's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Ethan's stomach twisted as he stared down the faces at the table, investors, strategists, legal counsel, each waiting for him to falter. He swallowed hard, feeling the vault of his chest tighten, but he refused to shrink away. He reached inside his jacket and drew out Olivia's vintage pocket watch, now wrapped securely in a leather pouch he'd fashioned in the lobby. He placed it in the center of the table, its brass surface catching the room's recessed lighting like a beacon. This watch, he began, voice steady, is more than an heirloom. It's a reminder that time reveals the truth. In that moment, he exposed not just the watch, but his raw vulnerability. He'd realized that his empire's foundation had cracks deeper than financial metrics could reveal, cracks born of dismissing voices like Olivia's. He continued, I've asked for your trust, and I know some of you feel it's been misplaced, but I'm here to earn it back, not through glossy presentations, but through concrete action. He laid out a phased plan restructuring HarperPay's leadership to include 3 board seats reserved for women of color, redirecting 10% of next year's R&D budget to social impact initiatives, and launching a scholarship fund named after Olivia's mentor program. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. The marketing lead's pen hovered over her notebook. The veteran investor's steepled fingers twitched. This was risk on a grand scale, shaking up the power dynamics at the core of Ethan's company. Yet he sensed something shift, a spark of possibility, igniting among those who'd once been silenced. He pressed on, letting the vulnerability fuel his conviction. I know words alone can't rebuild what was broken, but I promise you this. I will measure every decision, every pivot, by asking first, does this honor the people who power our success? Before anyone could respond, the door swung open. Olivia Martinez stepped in her posture, calm yet unyielding. The room's atmosphere crackled with electricity, her presence both a challenge and a potential bridge. Ethan's breath caught as she locked eyes with him. For a moment, the world outside, the flashing headlines, the plummeting stock ticker faded away. It was just them, the mentor, and the menta now reversed. Olivia's gaze swept the board. Her lips curved into a faint, inscrutable smile. I'm here not as an adversary, she said quietly, voice carrying the weight of every microaggression she'd endured, but as a witness to what leadership can become when it listens. She gestured toward the watch. That symbol of legacy, let it also be the symbol of renewal. Ethan felt a surge of relief and dread collide. This was the twist he hadn't anticipated. His chance at redemption hinged on Olivia's willingness to step back into the arena. The board members leaned forward, sensing the pivot. Did Olivia's presence signal her support, or was this a final test? Ethan's heart pounded as he realized the stakes had never been higher. Would she stand beside him, or walk away once more, leaving HarperPay to its fate? The clock ticked at 10:10, echoing through the hush. And in that pregnant silence, Ethan knew the next word spoken in this room would decide everything. "Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself," Ethan whispered, as he stood frozen beside Olivia's vintage pocket watch, now cradled in his palm like a fragile heart. The room held its breath, every board member's gaze locked on him. He could feel the weight of their skepticism press against his chest. A single misstep now would shatter any hope of redemption. He inhaled, drawing courage from the steady tick-tick-tick trapped inside the watch's 10:10 setting. That trapped moment of optimism had become his catalyst. "I've spent my life chasing growth metrics, market dominance, and the veneer of invincibility," he confessed, voice trembling but resolute. "But if we strip away the slides, the projections, and the headlines, what remains is the truth. I treated people like cogs in my machine." The words cut through the low hum of the emergency meeting, exposing the raw wound beneath his polished exterior. Ethan placed the watch gently on the conference table, where its brass face caught the overhead LED glow like a beacon of accountability. "That watch has seen more hardship than any of us," he continued, gesturing toward Olivia. "It carried her resilience through years of bias and microaggressions. Today, I invite you to hold my mistakes the same way, with patience and the promise of change." He met Olivia's eyes. In their steady calm, he saw both the pain he'd caused and the possibility of forgiveness. With a decisive nod, he pulled a thick sheaf of papers from his jacket, draft bylaws for the new Diversity and Inclusion Council, detailed budget reallocations for social impact, and a binding commitment to transparent leadership reviews. "I propose these as more than gestures," he said, turning to face the entire room. "They're enforceable, irrevocable changes that will restructure HarperPay's DNA." His CFO's jaw dropped. The veteran investor's eyebrows rose in surprise. This was uncharted territory risk on a systemic scale. Olivia stood beside him, silent support radiating from her posture. Together they formed an unlikely alliance, the founder owning his flaws, and the once overlooked mentee guiding him toward equity. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. This moment was his true test of leadership. Would he shrink back into defensive PR spin, or would he wield this vulnerability as a bridge to rebuild trust? Before an answer could emerge, the door opened once more. A young analyst, one of the staff Ethan had once dismissed, stepped in, her hands trembling as she clutched a smartphone. The gallery monitors flickered to life, revealing social media feeds alive with whispers. "Is HarperPay's collapse a lesson in hubris?" The analyst hesitated, then spoke, voice soft but unwavering. "Sir, you might want to see this." She handed him the phone, the screen showing a viral tweet. "The most powerful act isn't firing someone, it's listening to them. HarperPay's CEO just passed the ultimate test." The room erupted in stunned murmurings. Ethan's heart thundered. This was the twist he hadn't scripted: validation, not from investors, but from the people he had once overlooked. He realized that true power didn't come from billions in backing. It came from earning respect, one human connection at a time. And as every eye turned back to him, the question hung in the air. Would he seize this moment to transform HarperPay forever, or would he let it slip like sand through his fingers? The watch ticked on its hands, still frozen, waiting for his next move. "Right now, everything you've built is on the line," the young analyst said, her voice barely above a whisper, as she closed the social media app on her phone. Ethan felt his pulse spike. The entire room had gone quiet, eyes flicking between the viral tweet on the small screen and his own weathered face. In that suspended moment, he realized the true gravity of what was at stake, not just HarperPay's survival, but the fragile trust of every individual whose life he impacted. He stared down at Olivia's pocket watch, now resting next to the sheaf of bylaws. Its brass face reflected a swirl of anxious expressions around the table. "This watch," he began, voice firm, despite the rapid flutter in his chest, "represents the intersection of time and choice. Every tick we hear is a chance to build something better, or to watch it slip away." He held up the phone as if presenting evidence in a courtroom. That tweet, her words aren't just praise, they're a verdict from the people I once ignored. A low murmur rippled through the board. Ethan's heart thudded as he stood straightening his shoulders. This was his crossroads. He could retreat to polished statements and hollow reforms, or he could lean into this vulnerability, bending the arc of his empire toward genuine equity. "I choose the latter," he declared, voice echoing in the sudden stillness. He stepped around the table, meeting each board member's gaze in turn. "I propose we immediately reinstate all staff cuts made during the last quarter, with a full review by the new Diversity and Inclusion Council to ensure we never sacrifice people for projections again." The room stilled the weight of his risk sinking in. Some faces showed skepticism, others tentative hope. Olivia watched him with a faint, approving smile, her arms crossed, but her stance unguarded. The watch's broken hands still pointed to 10-10, an eternal reminder that optimism must be intentional. Ethan realized that by anchoring his decisions in that moment, he was crafting a new legacy, one where time served humanity, not the other way around. Then came the twist he hadn't foreseen. The veteran investor cleared his throat, leaning forward. He tapped the watch thoughtfully. "Mr. Harper, you're offering more than lip service. These are tangible steps. But are you prepared to sacrifice short-term gains for the long-term well-being of your employees and investors alike?" The question cut deeper than any financial analysis. Ethan felt sweat bead at his temples. He would be judged not just for promises, but for follow-through. He closed his eyes briefly, taking in a grounding breath. "Yes," he answered, voice unwavering. "I understand the risks, stock volatility, reduced margins, potential backlash from stakeholders accustomed to traditional metrics. But I believe that the companies who prioritize people endure, while those who neglect humanity crumble. This is more than a moral stance. It's our competitive edge in a world demanding accountability." As his words settled, the door opened quietly. The young analyst slipped back inside, carrying a small wooden box. She placed it on the table before Ethan. Inside lay a single gold key engraved with the Harper Pay logo on one side and the words, "Respect First" on the other. "This was made for you," she said softly, "to unlock the next chapter." The room cracked open with a collective intake of breath. Ethan's hand hovered over the key, the weight of both symbol and responsibility pulsing through him. Could he turn this defining moment into lasting transformation, or would it become another buried promise? The air was thick with anticipation, as every eye waited for his next move, for the fate of Harper Pay, and for the true meaning of respect to reveal itself. "Nothing changes until the first step is taken," Ethan whispered as he reached for the gold key etched with "Respect." First feeling its cool metal pulse through his fingertips, the boardroom's fluorescent lights hummed above, reflecting off Olivia's watch and the unopened box that had just arrived. Every face around the table watched him, some hopeful, some skeptical. But in that moment, Ethan saw something deeper, a collective yearning for real change. He slid the key from its velvet-lined box heart, pounding. That key symbolized trust, reborn, a literal unlocking of a new chapter in Harper Pay's history. "This key isn't just for a door," he began, voice steady, despite the tremor inside. "It's for a commitment to step through uncertainty, to prioritize people over projections, to lead with empathy." He held it up, letting the engraved words catch the light. The board leaned in as he continued. "I officially rename this conference room the Respect Council Chamber. From today forward, every major decision we frontline here must pass through a lens of respect for staff, for partners, for our communities." A charged silence fell. Ethan swallowed, gaze flicking to Olivia, whose calm nod confirmed that this gesture resonated. But he wasn't done. "I understand that reallocating resources, rebuilding trust, and weathering market skepticism are dangerous moves," he admitted, looking each board member in the eye. "But I refuse to lead a company that sacrifices its soul for short-term gains. We will launch a quarterly respect audit, led by diverse voices across all levels, and will publish the results publicly." The words hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down, Suddenly, a soft chime echoed the vintage watch, striking its frozen hourglass moment of 10:10. Olivia reached over, tapping the glass crystal. "Time doesn't just move forward," she said quietly. "It reveals the paths we choose. Some walk the safe route, others blaze new trails." Her eyes locked on his. "Ethan, will you be the trailblazer you claim to be?" The room held its breath. He placed the key in the center of the table next to the watch. "I will," he vowed, voice firm. "And here's the first trail tomorrow. I'm meeting with our field teams. Stories of those we've overlooked are the priority. I want to hear their truths before any board deck goes out. Because true leadership listens, first speaks second." He paused, letting the weight of his promise settle. From the doorway, the young analyst, her earlier tweet still buzzing across social media, stepped in. She smiled, tension unspooling from her shoulders. "I'll arrange it," she said, offering Ethan a simple nod of solidarity. That nod felt like sunlight breaking through ancient clouds, a signal that his risk had translated into possibility. Ethan exhaled, the envisioned walls between CEO and staff crumbling. Outside, the city's skyline glittered with promises and pitfalls. He knew the real test lay ahead, in the uncharted territory of authentic change. But as the watch ticked, key resting beside it, he felt a surge of purpose, stronger than any boardroom presentation, the power of humility action born from respect, and a belief that one person's first step can indeed shift an entire culture. And so, with the key in his palm, and a company to transform, Ethan Harper stepped into the next chapter, where each heartbeat, each decision would echo the simple truth that respect is the ultimate currency.